To go to makeshift homeschool,
go to weekwell.com and scroll down to makeshift homeschool. From there, you will see that there are many different lessons on many different topics that we are passionate about.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Rethinking Education. Today, we are going to be talking about our post on mental models. So we are going to be going through each mental model and what they mean. The first mental model is called model limitations. Our map is not the territory. This basically means that a map is not actually a correct view of reality. Let's say a map of the world. The continents are going to be pretty close, but it's not actually going to look like the real life globe. Sure, it comes close, but it isn't actually the real thing. This can be applied to our life as well. So, for example, let's say that if we think of the world as this certain thing, it's probably not going to be exactly that. There are plenty of things that we think are correct versions of reality, but in truth, it's not actually something that's actually true. There are many things in the world that people make assumptions about, but usually they never really come close. To go into this a little from a little bit more depth, in our last episode, we used the example of kindergartners thinking that the only jobs were police officer, firefighter, grocery bagger, and a few of those well-known jobs. As you can see, what they think is the only careers they can take up is not actually reality. In reality, there are many more jobs you can do. So that is something that is in our real life that can show our model limitations. So as you can see, this can be applied to reality and certain maps and other things. For example, different charts and models. So Aila, do you have anything to say about that, or should we go on to the next one?
Go on to the next one.
So the next one is the circle of competence. Aila, could you talk about this one?
Well, it basically means like you want to know things that you don't know. You want to know that you don't know things, and you basically don't want to think you know something, but you want to know that you don't know it.
And this actually ties in really good with your not knowing post that you also wrote.
Yes.
And it's also kind of also knowing the things that you can control as well.
Yes. Knowing that you're not the boss of the world, and knowing that you can't control everything that happens to you.
Yeah, just knowing, because there's a lot of uncertainty, and we just have to be aware of that uncertainty and try to focus on the things that are more certain, so we can base our actions on the things that are more certain. So we'll probably be more successful if we don't just take leaps without kind of evaluating the things that we actually do know.
Yeah.
Right?
So just know that you can only control your decisions, but you can't control what other people do.
Yeah, could you give us an example of that?
So if you're trying to maybe convince someone to do something, like maybe like make a present for your sister or something. well, you can't control what they do, but you can always ask them, but you have the decision to ask them or not.
And
So,
also you have the decision to be like, make a present for my sister, or be like, hey, it'd be really nice if you could make a present for my sister. She's been really great. And
it mostly it depends on what your decision is, but there is a role for them to decide whether or not to do it.
Yeah, you can influence other people's choices, but you cannot control them.
Yes.
Okay. So I think this one's very important, and it ties in very well with your not knowing post. So the next mental model is second order effects. This is kind of like this kind of is related to the circle of competence, where let's say we're in a chess game. If one person makes a move, so the first person makes a first move, then that is called the first order effect. When the other person makes their move, that is called the second order effect. The first order effect can influence the second order effect, but the second order effect can be many different things. Just like what Aila said, you can't control what the second order effect is going to be. You can only influence it, and also you can look at the most likely second order effects that are most likely to come. So then let's say if I just move a pawn forward 2 spaces, then the next person, we can try to evaluate all their different pieces and look at the moves that are used often. Also, the pieces that are actually able to move, like some pieces will be blocked off by the pawns because you're just starting a game. And so you just have to evaluate all that, and by that you can make pretty good assumptions of what the second order effect is. After the second order effect, the next person is going to move after you, and then so the next person is going to move after you, and then after they move, you are going to move. This is the third order effect, and just like the first order effect, the second order effect will influence the third order effect, and you can make those same evaluations by looking at the pieces, looking at what would be a good move, what would be a bad move, what is obviously a good move, what is obviously a bad move, and then you can kind of try to predict the future. Now, this goes farther than chess. It can also go into real world situations. Like, let's say United States put a tariff on some other country. What will happen after that? Well, I mean, it's kind of like chess. What is obviously a good move? What is obviously a bad move? What is a good move that may not seem so obvious? And what is a bad move that may not seem so obvious? And that can be extremely beneficial for many people trying to predict what will happen, but also maybe if you want to make some investments, then kind of trying to predict that that second order effect. So Aila, the next mental model, the fourth mental model, is probability over determinism. What does this next one mean?
Basically, what it means is nothing is certain. What that means, well, there are some things that are certain, like math, but most things are not certain at all. You can never be certain with it.
Yeah, and also it was saying probability over determinism, which is, well, there are things that are if you look at the probability of it being true, it's going to be a lot higher than other things. Like there are going to be things that are going to be a lot more likely, and you can be more certain about it than other things.
Yeah.
So you're going to try to look at the probability of things happening instead of just saying, okay, I know this. And also, by knowing that nothing is certain, try to take the words out of your vocabulary like can, cannot, like the things that are saying that I cannot do this because, well, chances are you can, because you can't really be certain about if you can or cannot do something.
Yes. There are like one example is like if you are riding your bike, you're learning to ride your bike, and you think, no, I can't do this, it's too hard. Well, you never are certain whether or not you can do it. Or whether or not it's true.
Yeah, it's a really good example. So the next thing is called principles. The fifth mental model is principles versus precedent, which is basically saying that you should try to think of different things you can do just as long as they go within the rules. For example, there is a movie called the Mighty Ducks movie from 1996, and they have a formation called the Flying V, and this confused the opposing team, and they actually ended up winning the game because even though no one else had used that formation in a hockey game, it went within the rules, and they decided that it was a very strategic move on their part to try to win the game. And if you try to make your decisions on things on things that have happened in the past, that can be very limiting because, well, yes, it's been done, and maybe some person was very successful with this method, but you are not only limited, but people can be expecting it. It can happen over and over again, and it doesn't allow you to just reach out to all those other scenarios that could potentially make you very successful, even if it hasn't been done before.
But even if you are doing a new combination or it's something new, it has to be played by the rules. Like in a game, it's either you're cheating or you're doing something unique that is still played by the rules if you want to like do something new that might win you the game.
Yeah, exactly. So Aila, the sixth one is called Bayesian updating. What is this about?
This basically means like update what you know when you have new information. When you
like updating your beliefs.
Yes.
With new information.
Yes.
Can you give us an example?
One example is like, well, maybe if you thought all grass was green, maybe one day there are two choices you can do. Maybe if you find a different color of grass, maybe you find a red color of grass and you're like, oh, now I know that there actually can be different colors of grass. Or you look at the piece of grass and you're like, oh, my eyes must be playing tricks on me, or I must be going crazy or something.
So if we get new information, we should try and rethink.
We should try to update what we think and update our beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this can be, this is often not used in a lot of things, like you get new information because in the Great Depression, everything was going great, and when some people started pointing out some flaws and some flukes that they noticed, people kind of just shot them down because they're like, everything's going great, nothing's wrong, and that was not really correct. And if they got this new information, perhaps they should rethink their belief that everything was going great and that nothing was going to go wrong.
Yeah.
Because that ended up causing a very unexpected recession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This also goes into one of the categories of not knowing. Because if you are blind to all the other things that can happen, that basically says you don't know that you don't know, or
Yeah,
you
exactly.
or you think you know something that just isn't so. Like,
And then,
yeah,
or if you do know something, but you don't want to change your past beliefs, right?
yeah.
And that kind of creates a special kind of stubbornness where you just like, no, this is true, even if this new information, that's not going to change that. And I think we should try to be a little more open-minded, because our beliefs can be extremely hard set, especially if you've gone through your entire life thinking this one thing, and whenever someone contradicts it, you just have to shoot them down. Because it's hard, though. It's not just like, well, like your belief in grass isn't going to be extremely strong, but there are beliefs that people have that are really strong.
Yes. Yeah.
So you should just and it's not like, yeah, we should try to use this this information to try to change our beliefs, but that can also be really hard sometimes as well. So the next mental model is called inversion, and this one is basically where you flip the question. So instead of saying, how should I raise my kids so they can be great, or how can I have a strong, trusting relationship or marriage with someone, and or how can I have a good career where my boss trusts me and gets me a promotion? How can I have good friendships? And how can I make money? Instead of that, just being like, how can I screw up my kids? How can I ruin my marriage? How can I damage my career? How could I frustrate my friends? How can I quickly lose a lot of money? When you flip the question, then you can now have a list of things you can try to avoid. And you don't want to do those things, you just want to try and avoid them. But when there's, what are the things that I should do? There are so many things that you can do that can get you in the place that you want to be.
Yeah.
But when you have like a general thing that you want to avoid, like, how can I frustrate my friends? Maybe if one of them is having a bad day, just avoid them. If they seem frustrated, if they seem like they're kind of having like a bad day or something, just avoid them.
And also when you flip the question, it also gives you a lot of other choices too. Because if you are asking, how do I do this? Well, somebody could give you an answer, and that might just not be the best one.
Yeah, definitely, because it's just, okay, I avoid these things. Now there's so many other things I can do. And also, just also allow yourself to make mistakes. So then, oh, okay, in my marriage, I did this one thing, and we
and it seemed like our marriage went through a tough time. And then after that, you can be like, okay, I'm going to try to avoid doing that next time. So then just kind of add that to your list in your head, or even on paper, that just like, okay, I'm going to try to avoid these things.
Yes.
As they never ended up well, or I don't think they're going to end up well.
Yeah.
So, Aila, could you tell us about our 8th mental model, Pareto Optimal?
Well, it basically means a situation where both people are happy. You want to be in a situation where you can make both people happy. Like, an example will be like, maybe you have 2 friends with you, but then you only tell one friend that she's a good friend. Well, that might make her feel really great, but what about the other friend?
Special, right?
Yeah. Like, what about the other friend? Is she gonna feel like she might feel like she's not as good as a friend as that friend? Well, maybe that's true, but you don't want the other friend to feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also get them kind of jealous, and that won't end well.
Yeah, and that usually doesn't end well, because when you get those kinds of emotions, sometimes they can take over you, and you might do things that you regret.
How can you apply this outside of relationships?
Well, once, like, sometimes the poor people want the government want the government to take some of the rich people's money and give it to them. Well, that probably will make the poor people really happy. But what if, like, the rich people worked really hard for it?
Yeah.
For that money.
Like if they kept working, like
full
trying to
jobs,
just trying over and over again, just trying to get themselves enough money. And even though yes, there should probably be people, and they probably need money to survive, and that is going, and that will definitely improve their lifestyle if they get extra money. But perhaps just taking it away would not be optimal.
Yeah.
And just like maybe provide more charities and try to create more like very persuasive like ads or something for people who do have more money, to try to donate it to the people who are less wealthy.
Yeah, but you want to make old people happy. Like, you don't want to make the poor people happy and the rich people who are now poor people sad.
Yeah, because if those people who aren't very wealthy, they need that fund, we should just instead of trying to just get them at an equal level, which is most likely going to be pretty low, instead of then try to think of more creative ideas on how we can, creative ideas on how we can try to get that money.
Yeah.
Like charity funds, and probably many more things we haven't thought of, because we just haven't really been thinking about it that much.
Yes, definitely.
So the next one is called Occam's razor, which is about which is saying that simple explanations are most likely to be the correct ones. So let's say, why did Jimmy trip on a rock? Well, it could be, he wasn't looking where he was going, and the rock just so happened to be there. And Jimmy was playing on his phone and didn't see the rock and tripped over it. Or it could be, Jimmy was actually paying attention
and then an invisible ghost placed the rock there because he had a quarrel with Jimmy's father the other year, and he decided he wanted to get revenge on Jimmy. Like, well, sure, maybe there was a ghost, and maybe there was a quarrel with him and his father. But it seems like the most simple explanation was that Jimmy just wasn't looking where he was going, and then he tripped over the rock. And this goes farther than Jimmy tripping over rocks. It's just like the most simple explanations probably are the ones that have less assumptions. So when you have really complex ones, it's probably going to have more assumptions that are going to have less evidence to prove. So for example, you don't know if ghosts are actually real. We don't know if that so-called ghost had a quarrel with Jimmy's father.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, at the story, it seems a little obvious which one would be most likely correct, but also when you
Sometimes
look
it's not
at
that obvious.
there are things that are going to be less obvious, and you can go stretching on to like taking in other like mostly irrelevant things and just trying to feed them into your argument. But there are just going to be more assumptions that arise, more things you just can't prove, and it's just try to pick the most simple explanation.
Yeah, because that might end up with the right answer.
Yeah. So could you tell us about Hanlon's razor?
Well, Hanlon's razor basically means that if like somebody like believes that people have good intentions, basically what that means is like one example is that if someone was being mean to you, well, maybe they didn't know they were being mean. Maybe then they didn't try to be mean. Maybe they didn't know they were being mean. Mm-hmm. Well, basically what it means is like believe that people are not trying to do bad things. Believe people actually maybe they're naive with what's going on, or maybe they're just trying to make a joke or something like that. But but
there's also like certain personality types who are a little more insensitive without knowing about it. Like they just aren't really that in tune with other people's emotions, and it's not like and it's more just because they're just not really paying attention that much. So and I am making a post about personality types and communication styles and love languages, which I will post when I have time. I still haven't finished it. I'm sorry. So the last one is thought experiments, which is basically a thought experiment. It just allows us to imagine the kind of what can happen next and how that will affect us, and it can allow us to imagine, to kind of take into account also like some unlikely scenarios and try to think about how that will impact us. So for example, like if when we lack data, thought experiments are often the best way to wrap one's head around the potential consequences of an action. So
So X is like scenario 1, Y is scenario 2, and Z is the future state. So here are some thought experiments that you can also read in on our post on mental models, which will be in the description. And so if X happens instead of the expected scenario Y, how will this change our expected future state Z? So if something happens that's unexpected instead of what was expected, how will that change the future? If you take action X, what are the likely outcomes Y? Examining consequences of a specific action. So just looking at, okay, if I do this instead of this, what is beneficial and what is kind of not really beneficial.
Yeah, but there are also many different circumstances where that could happen. There are many different ways that can happen.
You have to look at what do you lose by not doing scenario Y. If you do scenario X, maybe that'll get you somewhere further, but also by not doing scenario Y, that might be a really big drawback that you didn't expect. So you should kind of just think about that as well. So if Y happened in the past instead of X, what could have changed? So if something happened instead of what actually happened in the past, what would have changed, right? And if the current state X continues in the future, what are all the potential future consequences for Z? So to do this, gather existing facts about the current situation and consider all potential scenarios in the future that are consistent with these facts. So you shouldn't think of you shouldn't be thinking of impossible scenarios that, okay, well, if it this isn't going to be possible because I know these facts. And so then you should just eliminate that unless they're because you can think, okay, maybe this is possible, but we shouldn't dwell too much on things that are not really likely to happen.
Yeah. Even if they do happen, well, it's more unlikely for that to happen than other things.
Yeah, so then just don't try to waste too much time thinking about that. And even if it does happen, maybe it was unexpected, but it's happened, and we should just try to keep going forward instead of worrying about what's happened.
Yeah.
So, given the outcome Z, what historical facts / circumstances could have caused Z? This is kind of the inversion, which is basically which is the I think 7th mental model. So basically, it's just kind of looking at the past, saying what could have caused this? Why did this happen? Instead, and maybe Z wasn't really the expected outcome, and then you can look at the facts and be like, oh, I missed that. Or maybe it was just a really big coincidence, and then because coincidences happen.
Yeah.
And also, what causes X to lead to a specific future state Z? Identify a specific future state in the future, and then think through its likely causes. So think, okay, I said this, and then, okay, my friend will react in this way, and then think about its likely causes. So think about, okay, why would they say this? Oh, maybe it was because I said it in this specific tone, or maybe my wording was incorrect, right? And so just thinking of that is also very helpful. So So that is all 11 mental models. Thank you. So thank you for watching the 3rd episode of Rethinking Education. I hope you enjoyed and stay safe in quarantine. To check out the post on mental models, check in the description down below. And I will also put Aila's post on not knowing because it is related to a lot of these mental models now that I think about it. So, bye.